When you talk about my team, though, it's actually the main thing I think it's worth highlighting is that I was injured on a turnover operation, which is something that happens. You can't stay on deployment forever, and there has to, unit has to replace you, and there has to be a transition, and like the right seat, left seat kind of thing, where you're coming in, you're showing them what's going on. Maybe they're not all here yet, but then there's a transition. There's only so many beds, so you can't have all of both units there. So there's this phase transition, and it was in this phase transition where I was injured. I had deployed to Afghanistan. I was a platoon leader. Most of my platoon was still in the United States. We were on a nighttime operation. I'm shadowing. I'm not in a position of leadership. And in the course of this nighttime operation, I was with a small group of people up the top of a hill. There was a larger force of ours down below. And just to get through, the story, basically, we're at the top of the hill. I stepped on a pressure plate IED, improvised explosive device. It went off. It was a large enough potential explosion to obliterate me instantaneously, but it didn't. And I was laying in the dirt, and I didn't know if any of the guys up there were okay. But next thing I knew, they were on me, and the majority of them were not members of my platoon. And so that's what's remarkable here. Like you said, I only had a couple minutes or 90 seconds to make it because I had a double femoral artery bleed. So they had to take immediate action. SEAL medic up there is applying tourniquets. He had to apply 6 of them, I'm told later. And that's really tough. Really tough painful to go through that. We're compromised. So the enemy knows we're here. This is in the middle of the night and not a pleasant area of Afghanistan. So security is going to be important. And we had to get off of the hilltop because they're likely, and there were additional bombs up there. So you can't afford losing it. If you lose a helicopter in this situation, so the helicopter is going to land down below. The helicopter has to get all the way back from this airfield, which was a long ways away. And so time and fuel are going to be the essence. These guys were dragging me down the hill. They responded, in the way that they did, as you said, this selflessness, because when you think about it, I just met many of them within 48 hours. I knew one really well, others maybe just from before overlap, but some of them, you guys from a different team, I didn't know them. And they're putting their life on the line to try to save me. And they have a lot to get back to. There's this mission, there's all this stuff going on. And so for them to do that to me is a remarkable thing. And for me, my struggle was to stay awake despite the pain. I didn't do that. I may have been in and out of consciousness, but for the most part, I'm awake. I do remember this experience. It was brutal. I eventually got down to the helicopter, and then they got me on board. And it was a situation where the helicopter was going to have to leave the scene pretty quickly. Even if they didn't get me on board because the fuel was getting so low. And it really came down to a lot of things had to line up for me to even be here today. But yet it did line up. And there were a lot of people who I can thank and should thank and would thank in person if I knew who they were. But a lot of people, from the pilots and the air crew to medical people at different hospitals that I was never awake for, to include Germany. I was there, and back in the United States at Bethesda Naval Hospital where I ended up. But I woke up from a 10-day medically induced coma, and I'd been out. I found all this stuff that had happened. Like they got me on the helicopter. I remember that. I remember seeing a light in my face, and then apparently I was flown back to the field hospital. The guys continued with the operation. They eventually came back from the operation. They cycled through all to see me. They were told I probably wasn't going to make it, but I did take a turn for the better. I was transferred up to Bagram Air Force Base, from where we had been operating, so up to the main hospital in the country. From there to Germany, you have to be well enough to be stable to be flown to the next echelon of care, eventually back to the United States. And all of this is happening. I'm in this medically induced coma. And then it's shocking to hear that I came very close to not making it, and yet I have no recollection of this. It's relatively simple when I'm getting dragged off of the mountain, and it's sort of my primitive is stay awake, stay awake. That's the fight. There's some willpower there. But when I was in a medically induced coma, it's sort of like I would say it's disconcerting, because the part of me that would rationally say stay in the fight is not there, and everything's happening at some other level. And it was like a black hole. It's just wake up and I'm already back in the United States, and yet all this stuff had happened. So it's for me to dwell on that is it can be disturbing, but it's also just kind of amazing to even be here. And it's sort of like a second take on life, and that can be liberating. And to have this new perspective now is empowering, and to think that life, for every day that I have of it, on is a major gift. And for that, I think I'm a better person. I'm stronger. Always told us in the SEAL teams, that which does not kill you only makes you stronger. And so I came close to dying, but came out of it, I think, stronger.